Hello, I'm Silvia Karman Cubiñá, Executive Director of the Bass in Miami Beach.
I'm Thelma Golden, Director of the Studio Museum in Harlem.
Together, Thelma and I would like to give you a warm welcome to Curator Culture. But first, I would like to profusely thank our sponsors, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, and additional support from Art Bridges and Frankenthaler. The last 3 years, the Bass has presented Curator Culture, where we mash up conversations between people from all walks of life. So in the past, moderated by Tom Healy, our curator of public programs, we've invited Pete Buttigieg, Anna DeVere Smith, Liza Liu, Edwidge Dandicott, Billy Porter, Kimberly Drew, and many other people in fascinating conversations. Today, the Bass joins forces with the Studio Museum of Harlem for a very special Curator Culture. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello from the Studio Museum in Harlem. We are thrilled to join the Bass in presenting this fascinating conversation with 3 exceptional talents who have global audiences but strong ties right here in Harlem. Amir Questlove Thompson, Leslie Odom Jr., and Dr. Jessica Harris are going to speak about their recent work recovering and rediscovering some of the extraordinary events, people, and stories of Black history in America, and what we, as a creative community, can do to champion and preserve these invaluable and deeply meaningful narratives. We do hope you enjoy the program. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Thelma. Thank you, Silvia. I'm Tom Healy, Curator of Public Programs at the Bass, and we're thrilled by this partnership with the Studio Museum. And we're honored that leading our conversation with Questlove and Leslie Odom Jr. is Dr. Jessica B. Harris. Dr. Harris is a critically acclaimed historian and journalist. She's the author of countless books, including her powerful memoir, My Soul Looks Back. She's one of the leading experts on the culture of Africa and the Americas, particularly the food and foodways of the African diaspora. From television to podcasts, from the Today Show to the Food Network, Dr. Harris has reached audiences around the globe, and she's taught and lectured from Dakar to Rabat, from New Orleans to her home city of New York City. Today, Dr. Harris leads us from Miami to Harlem and wherever the next fascinating hour will take us. Thank you, Dr. Harris.
Thank you so much, Tom. And please, I keep telling folks, don't call me Dr. Harris. It makes me feel old. I'll take Dr. J or Jessica, either of the two. When I was first told of this conversation, an old television documentary came to mind. Black History, Lost, Stolen, or Strayed. It was quite revolutionary when it aired in 1968. And maybe worth rewatching on YouTube. But remarkably, that statement, lost, stolen, or strayed, still resonates today, more than 50 years later. Today, we are talking more about Black history and the Black history that has been rediscovered since that documentary was made. It is my enormous pleasure to be speaking with 2 men who have brought to light and brought to life rediscovered pieces of our collective past. Amir Questlove Thompson and Leslie Odom Jr. Amir Questlove Thompson, drummer, DJ, producer, director, culinary entrepreneur, New York Times best-selling author, 5-time Grammy Award-winning musician, and co-founder of The Roots. Questlove co-produced the Grammy Award-winning original Broadway cast recording of Hamilton, and recently made his directorial debut with the acclaimed feature documentary, Summer of Soul, which explores the legendary 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival. He hosts his own acclaimed podcast, Questlove Supreme, on iHeart, has written 5 books, including the New York Times best-selling Mo Meta Blues and Creative Quest, and recently co-starred in Disney Pixar's Golden Globe-winning and Oscar-nominated animated feature, Soul.
This guy sounds impressive.
Doesn't he?
I'll say.
Like to know him. Good to know him. Good to know him.
Thank you.
Leslie Odom Jr. is a multifaceted, award-winning vocalist songwriter, author, and actor. With a career that spans all performance genres, he has received recognition with Tony and Grammy Awards, as well as Emmy and most recently, 2 Academy Award nominations for his excellence and achievements in Broadway, television, film, and music. Odom currently stars and performs the songs of legendary singer Sam Cooke in the critically acclaimed Amazon film, One Night in Miami. His portrayal of the soul icon and musical performance of the original song Speak Now has been met with widespread praise and critical acclaim, earning him multiple award nominations. Now, this is not in his bio, but I got to add this because I predict that he is going to be one of our next EGOTs, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. I can't wait. I cannot wait. I am so looking forward to that.
I call it ghetto, but I'll agree. EGOT is fine.
You.
Me and John Legend decided to turn it and call it ghetto. So.
Okay, I can deal with that. That works. Definitely works for me.
Yeah.
Now, I've talked too much because we're really talking about reclaiming Black history. And how do we reclaim it? That whole idea of lost, stolen, and strayed. So, Amir, Questlove, I'd like to start with you.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find this virtually unknown, in plain sight event? How'd that come about?
Okay, so quick side note about me. You know, in my kind of 25, 26 year career, I've made my love and habit worldwide known of my knack for collecting pop culture artifacts, be it auction stuff or just things that I've collected in history. And these 2 gentlemen had approached me one day and told me about this like mythical concert that was supposed to have taken place in Harlem, and it had Stevie Wonder and Sly Stone and Nina Simone and B.B. King and the Chambers Brothers and Max Roach and all these luminaries. And, to be honest with you, I thought they were just trying to come up with some roundabout way to ask me for free tickets to the Tonight Show. Because oftentimes people will come up to me and be like, hey, I have this piano that Prince played on for da-da-da-da-da. Would you be interested? So, in short, I thought they were trying to stunt on me by making up some concert that I've never heard of before. And, because my ego told me I'm the all-knowing sage of everything musical. And I was like, oh, sure, sure, bring that footage in. Yeah, we think you'd be interested in seeing it. We know your love for history and musical, everything musical. So I didn't think I was seeing those guys again. And sure enough, the next week they come back to the Tonight Show and show me this footage that blows my mind. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did you guys get this? And more importantly, how do I not know about this? Mm. And then it went to, wait, why are you guys choosing me? Because at this point, it was like, this is too historical for you guys to trust with a first-time driver. But the insides of me were burning because how is it this easy to erase history? Because basically what I found out was that even with these names, most of the press was sort of lukewarm. There was like a blurb in it in the New York Times, like back in '69, but nobody cared. And once I saw what we had, I was infuriated. Like, how is Black erasure this easy? So it took 2 years to put together. And, it's a real passion project. Again, I'm about correcting history.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's an amazing story. May I ask? I think we'd all like to know, was it video they'd taken or was it video that had been?
Okay, so the whole goal, there are 2 organizers of this festival back in the Harlem Cultural Festival of 1969. And that is Tony Lawrence, a Harlem native from the islands that had a vision of putting together, all these acts. the reason why New York was open to having this event thrown in the summer of '69 was basically because every major city was trying to find ways to distract kind of the issue at hand, a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, if you will. And that was how to keep the cities from rioting and burning in the wake of Martin Luther King's assassination. And similar to how Boston had James Brown perform on television to keep people indoors watching them on TV. So this event was recorded, and I guess with the intention of selling it to a network or so, or maybe make a movie out of it. And nobody would even budge at it. And even then, even when it's sort of its subsequent counterpart does their festival, which we know as Woodstock. They even tried to say, like, well, guys, this is the Black version of Woodstock, Black Woodstock. They try to dub it as that. And people were just like, I don't know. Stevie Wonder and the Staple Singers, and we'll pass. You know, what hurts me so much is that the one performance not captured was by this unknown teenager who no one's going to care about anyway. Some guy named Luther Vandross. So I found the original contracts, and there was just enough videotape for like the major stars. So it was like, well, some of the local acts we'll save time on tape. And yeah, that local act was an 18-year-old named Luther Vandross. So that's the only performance that we couldn't capture.
Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. Well, that's a real performance and a real documentary style. Leslie, as an actor, when you recapture somebody, how do you go about recreating an individual and bringing them to life? And how do you go about specifically, I mean, because you've done Aaron Burr and now Sam Cooke, how do you deal with recreating an individual who's still alive in the memory of many?
Yeah, I mean, I had that fantastic script of Kemp Powers, you know, and Kemp started as a journalist. And so the four men are so well researched. They're just so exceptionally documented in this script, because while no one knows what the men talked about in that hotel room where it happened, as it were, you know, we do know that they were, you know, in there all night long, and we know enough about them from before February 1964 and after 1964 that I think one of the reasons why it rings true, why we were able to find, I think, you know, with Regina's guidance, of course, we were able to find and mine so much truth out of the script, is because they're just so well researched. You know, while we don't, you know, it's not a documentary. This isn't verbatim what they said. It is very easy to take that leap of the imagination, because we know enough about Malcolm to believe that this is what he might have said. We know enough about Sam to believe that this is what he might have said. So I started, you know, with that. And then I had so much music. The thing about the singing voice, I believe, is that it's also a deep psychological profile too. You know, you can learn, oh man, you listen to enough Stevie, and I don't just mean because of his pen. I don't just mean because of the writing. You listen to enough Stevie Wonder and you know something about the soul of the man. You listen to enough Prince and you learn something about what he prized, what was important to him, about his professionalism, about his sensuality. You know, and so Sam is no different. You know, you listen to enough Sam Cooke, and Yeah, a lot of his makeup started to make sense to me. His psychology started to make sense. So that combined with also the other, I think, the brilliant brothers in the room. We had Kingsley Benadir and Eli Gorey as Cassius, and Aldous Hodge as Jim. Kingsley, of course, played Malcolm. I was able to find Sam with all those things put together. I was able to find my Sam anyway.
Mm. And vocally, I I made everybody crazy yesterday because it's like, is he singing? Is he not singing? I mean, I was making Google crazy. It was like, does he sing? Doesn't he sing?
Yeah.
There was, a minute where it's like, is he lip syncing that or is he singing? How did you go? I mean, you've already talked a little bit about that, but I believe, and I've said that I believe that the human voice is like a tuning fork for the soul.
Mm.
And I really think that you somehow or other, you pinged that tuning fork and it just vibrated for my soul, certainly the way Sam Cooke's had as well. How'd you do that?
I imagine that it was probably in a similar way that you found your voice as a writer or as a speaker, the way Amir found his style as a drummer and a musician. We imitate first. That's why the preservation of the history is so important, because we are a link in the chain. We are, we hope, filled with everything that's come before and then some, and then we add whatever we add to the gumbo for the next for the next generation.
Food imagery, yeah.
For the next generation to we are cumulative, we hope. So I Sam was one of my teachers, as a singer. Sam was, and sure, I've spent many hours in the shower trying to sound just like Sam, or in my parents' basement trying to make my voice, trying to that tuning fork, trying to sound just like Sam or just like Marvin, just like Michael. There were hours and hours spent, or Peebo, and somewhere along the way, you have to go through the painful process of realizing that you are never going to be the next Sam Cooke or Nat King Cole or any of these guys. You have to be yourself, but you are cumulative. You are somehow made up of all that they've left you, and then you add your own thing. So I just essentially went back to that, to imitation,
Okay, so
wait, can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, I was going to say, Les, one of my favorite parts about not many people know that I don't think people are aware oftentimes in entertainment that most Black people are often under kind of, they're hyper aware of the ability to code switch. And I love the fact, like, Sam Cooke was very much aware of the two voices that he possessed, and the fact that you demonstrated both of those voices. Not many people know, like, he would have his voice for the Copa crowd that wouldn't scare them, which is more for like the silky smooth velvet voice. And then when he was amongst his people, that's where the rasps came in. And I love the fact that you demonstrated both those singing techniques, because not many people know. And Sam was very much aware of this particular raspy voice might scare this type of audience, and I could thrive further with this voice, and the opposite. And that really impressed me about your performance, that you demonstrated both of those voices.
The Harlem Square was such a, Sam live at the Harlem Square was so, such a revelation to me, because as a Sam fan, forgive me, but I had not really dived into that recording before. That was what we're talking about, Dr. J. That was one of those recordings that was lost. Or, kept from us for like 25 years or something like that. So in going, as I of course started to pour through the library, and I heard Mr. Cooke in front of that Black crowd, and I heard him combining all of the lessons of his life. That is him growing up as the son of that minister.
And people don't know that he recorded that album. What we're speaking of for the folks that are, if we're talking too much inside baseball, Sam Cooke recorded 2 live albums on the same night. His infamous Live at the Copa, which is downtown Manhattan, was an upscale white spot that most blacks weren't allowed into unless you had a connection. And so he did his what we would say his less threatening material, which is basically just being a respectable suit and tie person. And then in 4 hours, around 1 a.m, he does the most within an inch of your life, gut wrenching, gut bucket, down home, gospelized performance of those same songs that he did at the Copa. And it was just amazing to see that level of code switching within a 7-hour period of these 2 albums being recorded at the same time. So I digress. I'm sorry. This one question might lead into a 2-hour answer.
Oh, well, that's why I only have 3 questions because I'm counting on y'all to digress. We are people of the word,
Yes.
That's why we got griots. That's why we got, Amanda, that's why we got so much stuff. I mean, in the sense of we are word people. So use your words. That's why we're here. So digress. I mean, I think the thing about this all is so extraordinary because not knowing, which is in many cases intentional because the proverbial knowledge is power. When you know that about somebody code switching, and that deep ability to code switch, first of all, it valorizes code switching, which is interesting because it shows a chameleon-like quality that we all know we have. But equally, it tells us something about what it sounds like to be home. And home is maybe different things for different people, but there is always that bedrock form of home that is so extraordinary. And the home is the part that is often missing from the history. And what I wanted to ask you both next is, so how do you save that history? If you wanted to exhort folks today, how do you save that history? In many cases, there are different ways of doing that. So, Amir, I see you got the mic in your hand.
Yeah.
All right, Leslie, we want to hear from you too because I want to know, how do you save it?
Sure.
I think there's lessons to be learned on both ends, and when I say both ends, those that need to be taught, younger people. But then there's a great deal of amount of there's a great amount of older people that don't know that it's their job to also pass down that history. And occasionally, I definitely think that I'm one of the first generation of elders or whatever I'm supposed to be called at 50. That's more age conscious, if you will. Like people before me were proud to be like older and you're elder and a sage. And my generation's definitely the first generation that is desperately trying to hang on to their youth, no matter what, in mentality, physically, and that sort of thing. So that said, 10 years ago, I was reading an article online, and it was an experiment that MTV did, of which they decided to get the opinions of their interns, who at the time were like 18, 19 years old. So these are kids that were like born in the mid 90s, and they wanted their opinions on albums that were deemed classic that the kids never heard of before. And the results were shocking to some, because a Thriller might not be an easy sell, or that group Public Enemy is really, really hilarious and funny. It's like, Public Enemy is funny to you guys? But I started to notice a paradigm shift of whatever we held near and dear and people held near and dear before, the opposite comes true. So as a result, this particular album that got reviewed by a bunch of millennials was sort of like panned by anyone born past 1998. And of course, the internet had a field day, and the internet had a field day, and browbeated young people, whatever. And I said, well, guys, this is really our fault. Like, you can't be mad at people that don't know anything when they haven't been taught. Like, this is our fault that we're not teaching. So, as a result, I did 6 years at NYU because I felt like that's the least I can do, like, to teach it. Because people just often, especially entertainers, just think that it's just a given that this history will be passed on and passed on and passed on. We'll live in a time in which a figure as unavoidable now as, say, Drake is to the average hip hop fan in 2021. We'll live in a time period where it's just like, oh, what's his name? That guy from Canada. You remember, he came out like 40 years ago. He had about 70 top 10 hits. That guy. You forgot his name too? Like, that can easily happen.
Yeah.
And
I think that whole notion of generational passing things on is important. But Leslie, is it Leslie or Les?
Oh, either's fine with me, Dr. J.
Okay. In terms of that passing it on, is it a passing it on by just simply the embodying of the person, or can it be a passing on in the teaching? How many different ways do you with your multi-ranged, so we say reach, how do you pass it on?
Yeah, I think that you identifying it well. I think that there's a part of, in any movement, I've been thinking about this recently, there are positions, their jobs, if we're talking about SNCC, or if we're talking about, the ACLU, or we're talking about, any kind of movement, socially conscious kind of thing, which I guess I sort of feel like I'm a part of, not sort of, I feel like I'm a part of, just, by the nature of, my
Absolutely.
lived experience. So I feel a responsibility to that. And I feel like, I'm always questioning, what is my position? How can I be of service? And so there's a president, there's a vice president, there's a treasurer. God, you hope there's a treasurer. There's a PR team. There's a street activation team. There's somebody out there registering people to vote. And I've been thinking about kind of myself as a secretary as of late. Somebody who is deeply concerned about the business of the record. To make sure that we are recorded as, with as much truth and as much accuracy as possible, about who we are here and what we've made of our time here. Now, that is the work of my life. That's what I'm passionate about. And, and I will do my best to make myself available to pass that along in relationship and in relation to young people and people that are interested in that. Is certainly anybody who's an audience member. But yeah, for sure, there's gonna, I could, be forgotten too. And there are people that happens, but but it is there, and it is much better for the record to be there than not. And, I just believe that it matters that is there. It gets discovered in the same way that things go out of fashion and they come back in fashion, and so, some kid discovers some brilliant artist discovers some album that was always there, some book that was always there, and they bring it back, and then it's in, and then because they bring that thing back, then the kids go and discover all the things around that thing, so it's just important that there's a record, that, right? I mean, I don't know what else we can do.
No,
and it's there for those that seek it.
So you are the scribe, you are the history keeper. You are the history maker and the history keeper in a way, both of you. And while you were talking, Leslie, I tend to do 5 things at once in my head, but I was musing on what Questlove had just said, Amir, and dealing with the fact that we probably are 3 generations. I have a birthday next week, God help it. And I am, thank you, I am in the decade that starts with a 7. You just referenced the decade that starts with a 5, and you are in the decade that starts with a, Leslie.
Mine starts with an 8. Yeah.
No, the decade 8. You're not.
Yeah, I'm going into the decade that starts with a 4. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean that pretty much puts a 20-year spin on us as we go. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, with those 20 years. With those 20-year spins, how does that happen? How does that go about? How do we see things differently? I'm coming to the point where who have, unbeknownst to myself, become an archivist. I mean, I live in a house with 10,000 books.
Right.
And I'm trying to find somebody who wants these books, so be very, very afraid, both of you.
I'm already babysitting 6 other collections right now. So,
well, there you go.
Dr. J, don't you feel like, because I feel like Quest a lot too, in that meaning that when I'm telling young people, the question I get asked the most by young people is like, Leslie, how? How do I, right? And I'm just like, that thing that's putting that light in your face, follow that. If you are in any room and it's making your face look like that, do whatever you can to be in those rooms. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be pulling the curtain or handing out playbills at the Broadway theater, but like, I knew I was supposed to be around this thing, Did you feel, Dr. J, like, are you doing the thing that you thought you were going to do when you were a little girl, or did you discover it along the way?
I backed into it, because when you were just talking about the playbill, what most folks don't know about me is I went to the High School of Performing Arts in theater. My doctorate is in theater with a dissertation on the French-speaking theater of Senegal.
Oh.
And I truly wanted to be an actress.
Quest said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I heard that. That was the Senegal that did it for Quest. It was like
everything. Who knew? Okay.
Well, yeah. But I mean, so I backed into food. I totally backed into food, but food was what allowed me to do everything else. My generation was the generation where we didn't necessarily follow our hearts. My parents were the parents who said, you're going to get a job. And
right.
Go be, and you're going to do something that's going to earn you a living wage so that you don't have to do the things that we had to do to make you who we made you into. Right. So they deliberately sent me to a college where there was no drama department. Like, no, you will not be majoring in it. And I guess it wasn't the fire in the belly, because I certainly had classmates from PA who were Black who went on and did it. I was in the same class with Anna Maria Horsford.
Oh, wow.
And, we were buddies. She was at my Sweet 16 party. Yeah. But she had the fire in the belly that let her do that to the point where she became a major working actress. Mm-hmm. I obviously didn't have the fire. I didn't have whatever it was that I didn't have. So I took another road, and I actually taught at Queens College in New York City for 50, count them, 50 years. Okay. And that enabled me to have the time to do the thing that ultimately became the fire in the belly, which was to look at the African diaspora and just because food is the tip of the iceberg. I'm interested in it all, which is why I got them 10,000 damn books. It's like, and my motto is, if it collects dust, I collect it. So you can imagine.
That's important.
I think that the whole idea is we don't know ourselves as a people, just the finding out things, the finding out who we are. I've decided that I call something studying the silences. When you read history, you read it a different way if you're looking for the Africans in the history. You read it by looking for what's not there. You read it by looking for the things that are unspoken, the things that you can intuit in some ways from what you are reading. I remember going to Monticello and being astounded, absolutely astounded by the dining room space, where Jefferson had very carefully crafted it in such a way that the enslaved people would not be there. Hence his invention of the dumbwaiter. You put it down, you left. Because he didn't want those folks in the room where it happened, because he knew that they knew that it was the room where it happened. And they probably knew more about what was going on in the room where it happened than anybody that was in the room.
Right.
So it's all of those things that are studying those silences. The who's not there? Why aren't they there? What makes them not? What would they be doing otherwise? And that's how my crazy head works. And I suspect that our three heads respectively work in some kind of ways like that, with the questions that are germane to our own particular endeavors. In that,
It's weird to hear that approach if you say that. Well, one, I was going to add on to what Leslie said in terms of, when people often ask for advice on how to get to a certain place in their life, in their creative journey. And adding on to what Leslie said, I'm a big believer in that sort of hoarding theory that you had when you said, if it collects dust, I collect it. No, I believe that pursuing your passion is one. It's important to take everything in, like observe, absorb, and get knowledge. But it's also the way that I like to see it is also leave nothing out. Leave nothing out. And that doesn't mean that everything that comes in your path or your eyesight will suddenly become part of your brain power in terms of pursuing your passion. But oftentimes I see that most creatives have trouble in their craft when they're too discerning, when they try to determine how much of this information that they're taking in they're going to take. Okay, I'll just take this and nothing else. And I always say, to the opposite, which is be open and leave nothing out. But I also love what you said about silence, because 4 days ago, this blogger was asking about my drumming technique. And, I told him that probably what I'm probably known for more is what I don't play. I'll often leave a lot of space. And, once, maybe 15 years ago, I've read an interview, a book where Jimi Hendrix described that he's very aware of space when he does his blues soloing, how much silence to have in between a statement so that a person can take it in and not just, people tend to think that Jimi Hendrix is all just one giant shrill note of a billion. And it's not that. That's Jimi Hendrix imitators, but he's very aware of pacing and silence. And so that's something that I've, so it's good to hear somebody else speak of what's not there that is just as important as what you do. And that's true for all avenues.
Yeah, often in the case of our particular African-American history, and I mean that in the diasporic sense of the term, the silence is the only thing that we've got. And so you have to begin to listen, let the silence speak in
Right.
other kinds of ways. Leslie, in terms of silences, I just finished reading Mike Nichols' biography. And one of the things that he talks about in terms of directing things was about leaving that beat. How do you do that? How do you make that happen? How do you listen to the silence when you have very particular things you have to say that don't really vary, and beats you have to hit, and marks you have to hit? How do you let us know that?
Well, to me, the addictive thing about the performing arts, the thing that keeps me coming back is that it is a conversation for me always with spirit. It is a prayer. It is walking toward the poetry within myself. It is, it's a soul thing. So yeah, there's tons of room for spirit and for divine inspiration. It is. I'm a guy that I like sacred space. I like to preserve sacred space in my life. Um, we live in we all know the world that we live in, and there's a whole lot of there's not a premium, I think, placed on sacred space in popular culture, which is fine. I get it. I get irreverence, and it's fun, and I get it. But that space for me, this performing thing it is a sacred space for me. And so I get to have it is a space that is reserved for the best of me. It is the space in my life. And I'm going to say this, and then right behind it, it's almost shameful, because it is the space that I reserve. I am my least I'm the least selfish in that space. I am the most generous. I am the most focused. I'm the most, it is really a space that I reserve for the best of me. And that really, right, should be in my marriage, in my relationship with my children, in my relationship with my parents, right? But for lots of reasons, it's not so. So because I experience the best of myself in this performing arts thing, that I have access to that at all means that I can, pull things from that into my relationship as a father, and my business as a friend, and my business as a citizen, right? So it makes me a better everything. But that space is really, I'm my best. Shamefully, I say I'm sort of my best.
No, there's no shame, please. Absolutely no shame. I wouldn't think so. And I mean, I suspect that when we look at the power of our sacred spaces, to take it back to African-American culture and African-American history, lost, strayed, stolen, or whatever, the matrix, that founding drumbeat, heartbeat, is that sacred space.
Yeah.
That's what it all comes from. I mean, when you talk about Sam Cooke, he's coming from the church. That's that sacred or profane, whatever he wanted to define it as, that's his matrix. Amir, when you're talking about the drum, one of the reasons that the drum was outlawed in much of the United States during the period of enslavement was because it was so sacred.
Right.
So we think about that as kind of the foundation of our arts in a way.
Maybe I can ask you. I'm sorry. Now I'm turning. I'm doing the thing that publicists hate the most, where I start asking a question on top of a question. Keep it real meta. Maybe I can ask you. I always wondered. Okay, so recently, maybe 2.5 years ago, I've been fortunate enough to find out the origins of my family history. via Dr. Skip Gates
Mm-hmm.
and Finding Your Roots. So I was very fortunate enough to actually get details that most people don't get when they do those types of things. I got my slave ship name. I got to know the country I came from.
Which is
well, Benin.
Oh.
Benin. And so and yeah, all the details because of this very specific situation. The captain of the ship kept it goes to show you that social media has always been in our blood for 400 years. He kept an accurate diary of everything that happened that led up to his arrest and all these things. So that's how I have the details of the story. And the thing is that I know, so ever since I found out where my family came from, I've been doing a lot of research on their practices and everything. And it's one thing I always wanted to know. With what I call emotions being outlawed, just learning that like laughing not allowed on the plantation, crying, anger,
Mm-hmm.
all emotions not allowed, or you get punishable by the whip. I was wondering why singing was allowed. Singing was the one form of entertainment allowed on the plantations, which we, of course, used to our advantage to create songs to sing on how to escape.
Coded language.
You're right. So with the, besides the obvious, you guys keep singing, so I know that you're there no matter where I am. I always wanted to know why drums were outlawed, laughing was outlawed, reading was outlawed, writing was outlawed. Everything was outlawed except for singing, and how that was missed. And I always wanted to know if you had an answer to that.
I don't know that I have an answer. I probably have a theory because you ask the question, I'm gonna have to say something. But the bottom
line, theory.
I think that the idea, certainly work songs, singing was something that meant more work got done while folks were singing than got done when folks weren't singing. My things with enslavement always make me remember it was an economic proposition. People were about the money. So anything that would enable them to make more money, to have a better harvest, to have more active folks working, to have whatever, was probably okay. Drum, scared to death because that thing can talk and there's language there. Emotions could lead to crazy. You know, you get too much emotion, you got stuff that boils over. Singing seemed innocuous. Oh, look at them, they're happy, they're smiling, they're doing their, and so, but I think that, but back to Benin, which is one of my favorite spaces in West Africa, and one of my favorite places in West Africa, and culinarily, probably one of the closest places to the United States. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Wow, okay, I gotta learn from you, because I'm trying to learn all I can right now. I'm just recently learning that they're close ties to the Haitian culture.
Oh, well, Vaudin.
Right, which, and then they explained to me with voodoo, my soon-to-be in-laws are Haitian, so they're all too excited to give me
Benin twice. You're getting Benin all over again.
Yeah. So I'm trying to learn all I can.
Well, we can have multiple conversations about it, and I've got good friends in Benin. I will put you in touch with them. I was in Benin most recently, the October before we got sequestered. So
wow.
Yeah, wow. No. I've been going to Benin since 1972.
Well, it's my dream.
Oh, well, you ain't going without me figuring it out.
Good, great.
Okay, and you got to come too, Les. So
yeah, you can take along too, Les.
I'm happy. I will. You see, look, I'm happy to be a third wheel. I will listen to you too. Talk about it all day.
We're gonna have some fun with that, but absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, we were talking about that sacred space and the drum and that whole notion of how that sacred space then gives us the space, then gives us the place that becomes the genesis of our art. I am always brought to tears. I mean, just even thinking about it right now, I can hear my voice do that thing. By the power of the music of the Black church. That sacred space has spawned something that is, whether or not you are even a Christian, that sacred space has created something that is so powerful that it is transformational, and it has literally transformed the world.
Yes.
Because when we talk about that sacred space, you then look at the role of the drum that comes out of the African sacred space in the rest of the music of the hemisphere where they could play them.
You know, I wanted to explain to people in this film, and we get to finally explain that how important the church and spirituality was in terms of maintaining sanity. That was our therapy.
Well, that was also a release valve.
Exactly. And so it's not just someone going crazy on stage for, oftentimes you see people like James Brown screaming and it's funny to people and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of that happening in 1969. There's a lot of anger, a lot of sadness that gets expressed on stage. And you just think that these singers are throwing a fit.
But that whole fit thing, at one point I wanted to do a doctoral dissertation on the whole notion of possession and being possessed.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it with regards to voodoo, but I didn't do that. But I read an awful lot about it. But that whole notion,
it is important because that's how we think.
Happens.
Right. Like I was one of those Americans that, was sort of fell for the propaganda. Like when you saw Haitians, it's like, that's demonizing. When people talk of meditation and those sort of things, like I grew up in that very restrictive Christian controlling atmosphere that sort of laughed or saw that stuff as evil. And it wasn't until last year, once I did the research, that I realized, like, no, that's actually like Ifa and all those things. Like that's my true heritage, and that's where Africans came from. And so
that's a whole nother set of conversations that can go on. I was
it's the things I learned in quarantining. So.
Oh yeah, it's the things I was telling somebody. I said, this conversation would be great, but how much better would this be if we could all sit around a table, put a bottle of red wine in the middle and let it go?
Then the truth really comes out. Right.
That would be my dream one day. But just one kind of thing about that, and then I want to get back to my last two questions because we still on.
Sorry, we're rabbit holing.
Yeah, that would be what I do a lot of too. But the whole notion of the film Aretha, there's a moment in the film where she is singing and she's getting deep into it and she starts to arch backwards. And somebody comes up behind her, gently pushes her forward and pats her down. I literally gasped when I saw that in the film because I had seen the exact same gesture being done in Brazilian candomblé houses when someone was possessed by an orisha and the spirit was going to manifest.
Wow.
And that was like, oh my Lord. This is real, and it is who we are no matter where we are in this hemisphere. These are the things that we did not lose in enslavement.
You're right.
The things that we have subcutaneously in the marrow of our bones and don't even know it.
Held on to and didn't.
And we are so much products of that you can see. You can, if you are fortunate, as I have been, deeply fortunate enough to travel and to visit and to see other places, you can see it. You can see the connecting thread. It's, it ain't about brain surgery. It's like, oh, yeah, I know that. We do that too. And that's how it goes down. But in terms of that, how do we save this history? How do we manifest it? How do we continue to keep it going? Because the same thing that's happening here, as you said, folks look at that and go, that's kind of funny. Look at them old people. They used to do it that way. How do we save it? How do we save it in such a way that we honor it, keep it going, and keep it a part of us? And I'm going to ask Leslie first. So
we band together. We band together. We have, unlike any generation before it, look at it, the three of us are connecting right now in different cities, different time zones, having this conversation. We all have resources, we all have platforms, we all have communities that we're a part of, so there's a way for us to connect to one another and unite, and we can get things done when we put our heads together and we put our resources together. So we band together and we do the work. Whatever work is on our hearts to do. It's Quest's documentary. It's this little movie I'm putting together over here. It's how you've made space to give us a platform to lead us in this conversation that people will be interested in only because you're leading it. That they'll find their way to Quest's documentary, to Regina's movie One Night in Miami, because of this conversation. So I think that we band together and we continue to do the work that inspiration is divine. So the work that we're inspired to do, the books that you'll write, I hope you'll call us to lead a conversation for your next book.
Absolutely. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Very, 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 very afraid. And I think our time is getting ready to run out, but I've got two more questions. And one is, are there some particular aspects of Black history that you would like to see saved, found, or discovered? And I'm going to let Amir go first on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much just about not preserving history, but just teaching history.
Tarantino says, hey, Quest, Tarantino says, make the movie you want to see.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I want to do. At the end of the day, I'm trying to provide all the context and lessons that I didn't get when I was 12, 13 years old, and do it in an entertaining way so that both generations can share it, and not to negate anyone else's history. Because oftentimes I think when history is spoken about in a way where it's like threatening, oftentimes people feel as though celebrating one's culture, like Black history, means to negate other people's culture, and that's not at all. Like it can all be celebrated.
Okay, so it's all world history, just different facets of the mosaic.
Absolutely.
Okay, Leslie.
There's so much. There's so much. I wrote down study the silences. Wow, I'm gonna take that with me too. But we're in conversation. We're in conversation with them. Even Hamilton was. There were levels to that thing, and Quest and I worked on that together. There was the obvious layer of people that don't look like the actual people playing the people, and so like that's cool, and it's told with hip hop, that's cool. But I actually thought, I know from my experience being in it, the dissonance, the places where it was uncomfortable for us as performers, David playing Thomas Jefferson, us playing these slaveholders. And there was a tension in that we were not, it was not always flush. There were the places that we could empathize with, and sure, I can empathize, being a dad or being, a husband, right? But there are places that I don't like this. Right? And so that's a layer that the silence of we didn't speak about it. but there is a conversation happening with the silence. There's a conversation happening with the parts of this story that we're leaving out. We're absolutely aware of it. So anyway, I love what you said, study the silences.
No, wow. Okay. Well, gentlemen, I know this can go on and on and on and on, but we have done our due diligence.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. This has been, not joining us, thank you for having me, which is more to the point.
You're
This
welcome.
has been extraordinary, absolutely
Thank you.
extraordinary. Thank you both.
All right.
And hope to do it again soon. And I have to see you in Benin. And Les, I'll see you in the
We'll
room.
make it
when
happen.
happens.
All right, Les, I'll talk to you, brother.
All right, brother.
See you.
Thank you, Dr. J.